Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Swiss AI podcast called This is the Year. Today, we only have one participant in the podcast because the other one, unfortunately, had a medical emergency on his trip to Switzerland. So we only got the AI wizard today. Let me introduce him first. And Benne is out today, Joao. So today with us, Joao, how are you doing on the side of the pod?
I'm doing fine. All in one piece. Still building AI, still understanding what's going on, and reading the news that's been coming out. I mean, this week has been particularly eventful with Grok 4, some government deals, some acquisitions in the world of AI, but we'll get into it in a couple of minutes. So,
Well, good to see you today. At least you were able to make it. I'm currently also somewhere in the other side of the planet, so I took some time off to explore Mongolia, and I returned to China. Now I'm in Bali, so I'm actually more pale on
more
camera
pro
than
than
I'm
me
actually
somehow.
in public. Yes. So yeah, good to see you, Joao. Today we have a few things on the roster just for you in the audience. On this channel, we usually talk about all things AI, enabling you to build AI solutions. And we took this episode actually as an occasion to quickly deep dive into Grok 4, these large intelligent models that are coming out, for example, in this case, XAI. We have some philosophical discussion quickly on that. And then we go into more details of how you can leverage these large models in a composition way to build potentially cutting edge and corporate ready software. But maybe, Joao, just for the first notion, Grok 4 came out. What was your first impression, kind of ideas when you saw it? I think we both were fairly excited, but what was your best take on Grok 4?
I mean, I'm always skeptical with seeing the benchmarks, especially when they're released by the company announcing the model, because it's usually some version of here's the current benchmarks, here's us, slightly better than everyone else. And then you look at the graph and you see like the y-axis is a bit skewed, and the graph itself is made to make your model look better. But even then, I think Grok 4 has been looking pretty good. I mean, the stats on it, how intelligent it is and how good it is at using tools, it's pretty good. Especially because Grok and XAI in general has been a bit left behind in terms of the top players in the market. We've been talking about Gemini from Google, Anthropic and OpenAI have been like the top 3 players, and XAI with Grok making a comeback to, let's say, the leaderboard of the top 4 or top 3 models. So it's good to see some competition in the space. However, they made a comeback pretty quickly. And to do that, especially with the size and funding, you can't buy time, so you have to skip some steps. And I think the news we were seeing on X or Twitter with they're changing the prompt and having XAI or having Grok sound a bit like Hitler, or announcing himself that to be the new Hitler or Mecha Hitler. I mean, that's just one of those basis things that you should test for.
I mean, it's usually cutting a little bit corners, right? Maybe just for the audience, Grok 4 is the latest model by XAI. And they just took sometimes, probably most likely, a little bit of a different approach. I actually maybe can put it on the screen here. The bitter lesson is an essay I've had seen at university many years ago. I think it came out like 6 years ago. And this essay basically talks about the notion of you either have human intuition, human intelligence built into the model, so you make it a little bit human-like. Maybe just for the reference here, that might be going into the labeling of the problems you're training the model on, or maybe in the reinforcement learning. So you basically try to take all the human intelligence and you kind of try to make the artificial intelligence like that. So this was like one of the notions. The research, though, in the last 70 years, and that's basically the core idea of the essay, is like if you throw just a lot of compute at a model, aka chips, in today's world, most likely NVIDIA chips, it's yielding better results than human intuition. And that humans are just sometimes believing, at least that's based on the essay, that we can inflect our intelligence into the AI, and that's the better approach. But again, the rather better approach is most likely yielding better results where we have more computation, more chips, more electricity, and maybe more data. And that's basically what's happening maybe with Grok 4 as well, because they had to catch up. So they maybe had to take different design considerations. And in this component, maybe put that on the screen as well, XAI had built this huge data center called Colossus, 100,000 NVIDIA chips, maybe scaling up to 200K, maybe 1 million, potentially this year already. and then just actually threw that whole computation on these transformers, and they kind of figured it out in the first place, as opposed to maybe more a nuanced way, like OpenAI took, maybe like Meta is taking, where we have labeled problems, labeled data sets, really human, again, injected intelligence. And I just found particularly that component fascinating, that you can just scale up compute, and then it kind of works out. Because
I mean,
it just, we anyway never know. Yeah.
compute does scale, but it has like a cost, right? I mean, we already have immense like power bills and the cost for the data centers, not only for the power but also to cool the chips. And so you can scale these data centers to a point. You can scale these models to a point, but it'll be hard to keep going after. I'd say when you get into millions of chips, I think then we're talking about like billions of dollars or euros invested into data centers, and so it starts to become harder and harder for new competitors getting into the game, because no one will have a data center in their pocket ready to go. And also, these models, like, they can only get so big, right? But there has been the trend. I mean, even before we had LLMs, one of the big breakthroughs we had was building data sets synthetically and using models for reinforcement learning. So basically not just using data sets we had, but using models to create new data sets and train them on the data sets in a single loop. And so having that kind of architecture then be applied to LLMs, if you look at the history of AI, it all seems like it was leading up right up until this moment. So it is scaling. It is like a pretty fast way of scaling. Just make the models bigger. But we still are seeing open source models. Also, besides Grok 4, we had Kimi from Modular AI, like a Chinese startup. And it is also a beast of a model, especially in the open source world. It's on level and beating like some of the models from OpenAI. O1 is already pretty beat from by Kimi. And these models are open source, so the point should be for you to be able to run it on your computer, or if you're a company, you're able to run it on your hardware. And as a company, you want to be able to run it, like that makes you independent of outside servers, that makes you independent of using outside services that might steal your data, so you can make things secure and within your hardware. Thing is, if models are trillions and trillions of parameters, they won't fit your hardware. Like, the bigger the model, the bigger the cost it is to run it. I've seen people trying to run Kimi's like quantized version, and for the audience, and then I'll skip a step here. For the audience, a quantized version is usually a model that has been retrained so that it uses smaller bits, so a smaller number of bits for each number, for each weight. So instead of using full 32 bits or full 16 bits for each number, then you can use 8 bits or even 4 bits per number. It's not as precise, but you can get still most of the output, most of the accuracy, like 95% of the model still there, just way smaller. And people, even then, like a quantized version of Kimi, I think I saw someone running it on 3 different like MacBooks, like chained together, like pro level MacBooks with over 500 gigs of RAM. So it's not something that's super simple, and it comes with a high cost, I think.
But I think maybe also the data center approach might be, I don't know, decentralized also. So you might have one 200K data center. There's like, I think, still a pending research field that's ongoing, how much you can decentralize training compute and inference compute. But maybe just before we actually talk into maybe the notion of how you can actually leverage these large models, maybe just the last notion, just to sum up maybe this new development. I mean, this is also why the show is called This is the Year, because these models are coming out continuously better after the other. So most likely you can expect after Grok 4 and OpenAI, ChatGPT 5, you might expect an Anthropic version that's maybe on par. So you just maybe again put it on the screen here, just a benchmark on these new releases. They're just continuously moving upwards and most likely moving to the left side, being cheaper per computational unit, aka a token. And that's actually where it's really the interesting part. I'm sure just briefly before the show, we had this chat on, should you wait until these large models are coming out, that your intelligence is good enough, or should you already be starting to build maybe composable software like products or services using AI, and then once these models are coming out, you're actually just replacing the base model, and maybe you can still have some smaller models like as guardrailing or as some other services that you're running. What's your latest takeaway? Should you wait for ChatGPT 5 or should you kick it off in on like July 2025?
I mean, everyone's waiting for ChatGPT 5, but you may as well get a very good share because it might take a while. OpenAI just announced that they're delaying the open source model that they were releasing, and ChatGPT 5, which won't be that open source model, which will be a model that they'll launch even later. I mean, it's gonna take a while. And you can be waiting, like you can just check out each model and see if the response is the level of intelligence, the level of coherence and clarity that you want. However, by the time that model comes out and you find just the right model to build your product, and the guy next door already built the product with the last model, and all they had to do was change the models behind them. Maybe like change a couple lines of code, maybe 10 lines of code max, and they already have a working product with the latest model. And you, as a company or as an individual, are going to spend the last 3 or 4 months building an unfinished product with this last model, and you'll be late to the market. Like, you're just out of the competition, and before you even started. So don't wait for the perfect model. Like, build, because the models already are pretty good, and if you want them to get better, they will. But have your product ready, and it's really good to have it modular, so you can just change the model behind it. Even to save on inference costs. You can be running on Google, but if somehow Anthropic becomes cheaper, you can switch to Anthropic, switch to OpenAI, or switch to whatever player you want.
I think there is even this like discrepancy that's somewhat like maybe taking place now, especially because the architectural decision on Grok is more the truth-seeking part, like maybe exploration of new ideas. So let's say a real-world exploration model might be rather the Grok approach. You have a lot of compute and you kind of give it a little bit the leeway of figuring it out and coming up with its own weight. I mean, so you might actually have a modular approach, as you perfectly said, Joao. And then once you actually have a solution or a use case in your mind where you need an explorative model, for example, for new approaches, new ideas, new project ideas, new business ideas, maybe new physics ideas, medical ideas, whatever you're doing in chemistry, in biology, you might actually opt for more this like truth-seeking or like explorative model, like the Grok version. Or again, according to the essay, you want more the human-centric approaches, human models, human-like models. For example, maybe in finance, you don't want to reinvent financial models. You kind of want to stick to the ones they have. And so you might opt in for more an Anthropic one or an OpenAI one. So I think this is really maybe the difference as well. Once you have it modular, you can just basically select the use case. And I think that's an interesting notion as well. Just reading, especially the specs on Grok 4, it's actually maybe even close to be coming up with new ways of how the universe works. We never know. So as opposed to the other ones, they're so heavily over-engineered to be representing the human intuition. Forget about finding anything, right? Once you have some boundary, it always yields back to, I can't answer that kind of. So yeah, maybe just to wrap up this topic, it's a truly exciting time. Most likely we see GPT-5 hopefully until end of 2025. We'll again probably blast through all the benchmarks and then probably Claude comes later after that. But yeah, just the speed is definitely ongoingly upward and not downward. And just Grok 4 is yet another incredible, large, intelligent model. If you were to build that, maybe to loop you back in, Joao, in a corporate setting, what are maybe some key considerations at the very beginning of a very new project or a new product that you're building? Like what are maybe some design considerations that you would say are important after you kind of chose the models maybe?
So the basis for these kinds of projects have, two sides. One is a software project, and your software team should already know all these basics, is to have strong authentication, have a good database and a good architecture and a good infrastructure that you can control. Usually companies have a cloud that of their choice, can be Microsoft Azure or AWS from Amazon, Google, or there's some other like smaller players in the market too. But you need to have that pretty well defined. Otherwise, your team building GenAI product will have to do all those decisions that I have nothing to do with GenAI. I have to do with setting up the infrastructure for any software project. But then there's the GenAI part. And for these GenAI kinds of projects, you have a very simple loop that you have to run, is get the message from the user to the model. The model will think and give you actions, probably some tool calls. So like a search to request the web for this, a search to request the database for that, a search to see some documents, some PDFs. And then you on your side will run those searches like within your environment safely, so you can check what the model is actually seeing and giving out those results back to the model. So it's a loop and you can repeat this as much as you want, as much as the model will find it useful. Like the model will give you requests, you'll try to answer them as much as possible, give out the results to the model, and then eventually the model will come out with the final result, the final answer for your user. And so to run this kind of loop, you need to have very good, let's say, checkpoints in a way that you can break at any point, at any time. Maybe the internet went down, maybe some tool failed, maybe some of your servers went down, Enter just unplugged something. 1,000 things can happen. I could listen all day, but you need to have
Or
some
what
checkpoints.
happened to your house?
Or whatever with my like the power kept coming down. There was something short-circuiting the power board, and so that can happen. Like you don't expect it, but it will. And so if you have checkpoints, then you can just resume the last known checkpoint where everything was going okay and resume your loop. Especially if you have human-in-the-loop interactions where you want the model to search for something. And this is the case, for example, in OpenAI's ChatGPT deep research, where now when you ask a question, most of the times, at least in my questions, it'll give me some questions back, so to specify something. I could say, oh, when you say you want to search this, do you want it in a table or do you want to ask some kind of graph? Or, do you mean A or B? Like it'll try to clarify some parts even before it starts its search, to then go ahead with the full loop search mode. And this is a kind of like human-in-the-loop interaction where you stop what you're doing, you ask something from the user will confirm or will choose between options. Like to have that, you need to have checkpoints. And a good framework to that is LangGraph, which is like based on a state. You can just save the state, resume it whenever you want. It is a checkpoint by itself. So a state should be like everything in a conversation so far up until that point. And then you just resume it with information from the user and have your research or have your loop work just fine. But to have that, I mean, you have to have some pretty good understanding of how these models work and how this loop is supposed to function. Frameworks have different approaches to like having this loop run, but the loop is basically always the same. Is run the model will give you some requests, answer those requests, give them back to the model. Now, if you've seen, and I've seen a lot of job descriptions and job ads, because recruiters keep sending them my way, I have to turn them back and tell them I'm not interested. But I've seen a lot of job ads for GenAI positions. And I've been seeing this pattern, and it's pretty interesting that you can understand how mature a company is in the GenAI world pretty much by reading a job ad and checking some things. Because in the beginning, and I started in GenAI world, luckily, and this was just timing in the beginning, and if you saw a job ad that looked pretty much like a data scientist position, but it was for GenAI, so it mentioned Python notebooks and it mentions PyTorch or TensorFlow or some other frameworks for doing data science, and then GenAI, then you can pretty much understand that that GenAI position is pretty new in the company. I mean, they weren't looking for data scientist position and the GenAI world. But if it is a more mature company that has products and has GenAI products, and this is like a go-to question every time I get these kinds of calls, is ask, do you have GenAI products already in production, or are you still developing them? And if so, like how many are in production, just for you to get a sense of how mature this company is and how well they've established themselves like with GenAI. Because it might be the case that a company is like wants to start GenAI products, but they have nothing yet, and that means it's up to you to decide a lot of things. You might have a lot of hurdles already, and so it's a very good checkpoint to have if you're looking for jobs in this position.
I think it's a good add-on to the video. Sorry, just to interrupt you. I think we shot, maybe I can put it on the screen here. Like if you're just getting started in the AI world, there's just 2-3 notions on that are very new concepts. MCP, so we basically model context protocol where you can give the agents tools like for them to be equipped to do certain actions. We had a video on that, so I put that on the screen. And maybe what you were mentioning, Joao, as well, is the other video where we basically just say these are the projects you could be doing in the first place, or as a company, maybe potentially you can actually be delving into these business ideas. So just to quickly clarify that we do have some sort of resources on that as well.
This is complementary information, is you as a job seeker figure out what kind of company you're applying to, especially when they call you and you get to talk to them. You can have a pretty good idea on how well they've been in the space. Because it might well be the case that they have a product already, especially if they specify kind of a tech stack. We've mentioned a lot of frameworks in the podcast in the last episodes: LangChain, LangGraph, Panic AI, Crew AI. Like, there's quite a few. And if they mention like one or a couple, then it usually means that they're going for that kind of framework. They're using already that framework, or they decided on using it. And you have an idea that, well, they're in a very specific direction. If they don't mention any kind of framework and just mention LLMs in general, then to me, at least, it's kind of a red flag, because
then you're
they
hired
have
to
nothing.
figure it out.
Yes,
That's like,
I mean, I had
like,
to figure out in the past. But by now, a good company should already have some direction on that field.
Of course. I mean, basically on the architectural standpoint as well, like they have some sort of, either they have a project already or they're about to kickstart one with some sort of backbone of an idea. But yeah, maybe just to quickly re-wrap up the episode before we approach to the finish. So we have new models coming in, like the larger, really more intelligent models like Grok 4 that just got released. And if you're building AI solutions, be it as a student, as a corporate person, or as maybe an entrepreneur, a great design consideration is not to be locked into and building around one model, but make it as modular as possible. So you can swap it out like a Lego block, and you might be using different frameworks. There are open source one, there are closed source one, they're great, and there are maybe less great ones. It's just simply the stack that's now building it up. So definitely check out the description. I try to put as many links as possible to that as well. And then if we look ahead into the future, it's really just a kind of a problem to solve for, is basically which use case are you going for? And some of these architectures seem to be somewhat a little bit modular as well. Is there anything else, Joao, from your perspective that you want to add on to today's episode? It's a bit of a quick update on the large intelligence I think we're seeing now. So the age of intelligence, I think, is on the verge of actually happening. What else is there to add from your side?
Try different things. I mean, we've been Bene back when he was here. We would talk about using Gemini and having Gemini 2.5 Pro as our go-to model. The thing is, there's a lot of really good models out there. I won't say if they're better or worse. It really depends on the use case. But I've had cases where I was using 2.5 Pro, and it was getting kind of in a loop, not giving me the answer I wanted, or not in the format that I wanted. And so I changed out the models just out of curiosity, and models that I considered and are usually worse got me a better answer. So if you try different models on your personal use cases, on your business use cases, different models have different kinds of responses, and sometimes the unexpected model will give you the best answer. And so I ended up using OpenAI's 4.1 answers sometimes, because I like the way that it writes some things. For other things, I use 2.5 Pro. Not for coding. I've started using more of an Anthropics models. So I've started to diversify the kinds of models that I use, and I think people should too.
Maybe I have one last question. I have my own answer already prepared. What would it take for XAI or Grok to catch up to ChatGPT? ChatGPT currently is around 1 billion MAU, or monthly active users. Probably soon in the future, 1 billion DAOs, daily active users. And all the other players, the Anthropics of the world, the Geminis, the Metas of the world, and the XAIs, Groks of the world, they're trying to catch up to this behemoth that just seems to be running away, especially the B2C market. But what would you say would XAI need to do that there's like this wake-up effect and everybody would switch from ChatGPT to now Grok 4, 5, 6? What is needed?
I mean, if they integrated with the platform, like with X or Twitter,
formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, formerly known as Twitter, they'll get automatic increase in users, because I don't think people, especially most people, are not that demanding in terms of what the answer is. They just want a good answer. And ChatGPT became the Tupperware of models. Like, it is the go-to brand that everyone knows.
It's even like I'm going to Google, or now in the new world, I'm just ChatGPTing. It's actually becoming a verb. So that's usually a bad sign for all the competitors.
Then again, if you make your product more accessible, the UI works, I think they'll get an automatic increase in users. But I think it's mostly marketing, at least in my opinion. Is it
like
yours? Was that your prepared answer?
Oh, the answer is, I have a different hypothesis here. So basically, I think OpenAI currently is winning because of the product. I think the models itself, there are better ones out there. So that's kind of why I think currently OpenAI seems to become like the Apple of like AI, like having a smooth UX, a smooth product experience, highly effective, highly like easy workflows, like, but the actual underlying intelligence might not be like 10x better than any other competitor. So they're actually winning currently on product. If they're able to combine with John Ives' startup, they're basically acquired maybe 2026 with a new device, OpenAI might actually become the new Apple in the first place. So this is like the current, I think, vision I currently have. How can XAI win? Based on like this truth-seeking approach. I believe if XAI can show that these large language models can come up with new concepts, new theories, new hypotheses, or even new ways of understanding the universe, then it's kind of the de facto best intelligent model. So maybe people switch to that. I don't know. So this is kind of the idea I have. Once they're actually coming up with something brand new, as opposed to just the way a human does it, I think OpenAI will win because of, again, better product, better integration, better app, already at 1 billion MAUs. But if XAI comes up with something brand new, then the game is maybe tilting a little bit to the X team. I don't know. So
I
how
think
does
there's gonna
that
be
argument sound?
a really big focus on the voice mode because I mean texting is fine, most people do it.
True. Yeah.
But writing your answers
Yep.
and writing your questions like with the full context that you want and asking whatever you want through text takes a while. And OpenAI like debuted the voice mode and it was pretty good. It's still pretty good, but not quite there, not the level that I want it to be yet. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what voice modes are coming out.
But did you see
These
the
new
Grok 4
players.
voice mode? Because it was part
I
of
haven't
the
used it.
demo.
I haven't used it yet.
Me neither. I tried to use it like I think yesterday, and it didn't really fully work on my phone yet, at least. But it was very impressive. The latency they took down incredibly much, and it's like super fluid. Like you can, because something I was always annoyed if I was chatting to ChatGPT, when I interrupted it, it had like a huge latency and I couldn't have an interruptive conversation. Like, don't do that, go this way. And I think with Grok 4 voice, I think that they kind of removed that like quite significantly. That's a good point, the voice component. Okay, so maybe two things. They're actually becoming a better voice model or a better text to voice. And at the same time, I'm sticking to my hypothesis. When they come up with something new, aka a new discovery, a new material, some sort of new way of understanding the universe or physics, maybe even in thermodynamics or fluid dynamics, maybe something in the rocket space for Elon Musk, maybe people will yield and jump ship from OpenAI to XAI. Joao, thank you for joining. As far as we got informed, Bene is still out next week. So I think we will stick to this duo, and we certainly have a few more topics for you prepared in the audience. Once again, we do shoot these episodes every single week, sometimes the three, sometimes the two of us, but we're certainly trying to prepare and present the best understanding of how you should engineer AI solutions, be it as an entrepreneur, as a student, or as a corporate professional. Please like the video if that would help us kind of yield a little bit of a larger audience. If you have a comment, feel free to drop one, and we see us in the next episode. Take care, Joao, see you, and until next week, bye-bye.